about this. I even I've got notes because I don't want to miss anything because it's just such an important topic
Right.
that I don't want to get caught up in my brain. And you know how it is when you're talking and you're like, oh, I should have made that point. So
I'm sure you're
uh,
going to land all the points.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah.
So it's important. Like people have been reaching out to me, like I'm going through this right now.
Yes. 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 It's so crazy how common it is,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, right? But I just think that as Black people, we just keep going, going, going because we're like, well, we got to work, got to work, got to work. And then you start
Exactly.
thinking, is it me? Is it something wrong with me? But no, it's nothing wrong with you, right?
Right.
So yes, yes, yes. So I think we'll get started. Um,
Hey.
Hello everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Dr. Kamani Norrington Sands, licensed clinical psychologist in Los Angeles, and we are here talking about workplace bullying, right? And I'm just sharing some conversation with Liz McElmore. Did I say that
Mm-hmm.
right?
Macklemore, huh?
Yes. Okay. And so Liz has a phenomenal, phenomenal podcast that you should all check out called In the Black Seat. I've been on her podcast and she is an excellent, excellent interviewer. So I said, you know what? I have a topic. I think I'm going to ask her to be my guest, right? So we're going to have Liz here, and then a little later, we'll have another clinician to join us as well, Melissa Shepard Williams. So, Melissa, thank you again for joining us today. And Liz, I just want to ask you, there's a lot of, I talked about workplace bullying, and I'm just curious, is it really such a thing called workplace bullying, or is it something that people are making up?
It absolutely, and it's such a miserable feeling because you know that we hear a lot about bullying in the school place, and I feel
Hmm.
like it's behavior that continues into the workplace, and it's worse because people are adults, and so they have more time to kind of refine their cruelty, and then if
Hmm.
they're in a position of power, they're going to be even more of a bully, right? Especially if you feel like you can lord something over someone.
Hmm.
And I think there's even more at stake because, kind of to what you were saying earlier, depending on where you are in your career, you
Hmm.
can't just pull up stakes and say, you know what, I'm out of here. You've
Right.
got mortgage, you've got a family, you have bills, you're in a place where you feel like maybe this is what you need to go to that next level. And so you
Mhm.
feel like you're stuck. And
Right.
so that feeling on top of being bullied, it's just a completely toxic mess.
Right. Right. So
You have to,
as you said, Liz, it's like you're questioning yourself on some level, and then you feel like I'm so invested in this. I need to stay because I have responsibilities, but you feel just stuck in a very toxic place. And you said something that was very interesting. You said refine their cruelty. Can you tell a little bit more about that? What does that mean?
I think people who are going to be cruel, they know what buttons to push, right?
Mm,
If you're in any kind of relationship where someone is abusing you, they
hmm.
know what to say. They know how to get to you with
Right.
what, and so they have time and that experience to really, identify it. It's like almost predatory,
Wow.
really, to identify those areas and to target you on that.
Hmm. Hmm.
It can even be something like if they're your immediate manager
Hmm.
and you're in the review process and they
Hmm.
know that you want to get ahead because you've actually told them that, they might
Right.
move things over you or make you jump through ridiculous hoops
Right.
or hold that advancement from you because they're just trying to bully you.
Wow. And so, Liz, I'm wondering if you can, because you're talking about ways that workplace bullying is a form of trauma, right? And so you also described it in terms of like domestic violence. So I'm just thinking about power and control, and we know about the cycle of power control. So we hear about how there can be situations where, particularly if you're trying to get it, advance, a manager might know that and kind of like manipulate you on that, right? So
Mhm.
just like we know in terms of power and control and abuse that it has like a honeymoon phase too, Is there a honeymoon phase involved with workplace bullying?
I think it depends. I think it depends on who's involved in the interview process and how that goes and what
Hmm.
that looks like when you actually get into the workplace and you're settled down with your colleagues.
Hmm.
For me, it happened fairly quickly. And I think it's because I identified like, okay, these are some areas that I'm not really entirely comfortable with, and I
Hmm.
know something is going wrong.
Hmm.
But I think it really is dependent. And you could be in a great place in
Right.
your workplace 2, 3, 4 years, everything's cool. Then that new manager comes in, or that new boss comes in, or that acquisition happens, and things
Right.
just completely change.
Right. Right. And Liz, you spoke a little bit about you knew pretty much early on, like, ooh, like there's a problem, there's something going on, right? How could you
Mhm.
tell? Like, how could you tell something was not quite right? How could you tell that it was workplace bullying?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think part of it was kind of my personality because I'm sensitive to interactions with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to be sensitive to the point where, oh, this person doesn't like me. I couldn't function. But that was something that I worked on in the therapeutic process,
Mm-hmm.
harness that sensitivity to be sensitive to what I'm receiving, but not take it personally.
Hmm.
So when I realized, okay, something is going on here,
Hmm.
the therapeutic process gave me the tools to kind of identify that feeling and sit in it,
Mm-hmm.
realized like, okay, this is not normal. This is not anything that I'm used to dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did, I talked to a couple of people that I trusted. And I know everybody may not have that ability, but I
Mm-hmm.
was blessed to have people that I had formed a bond with.
Right.
And I told them, I want to speak to you in confidence and I want to share some things that have happened. I
Mm-hmm.
need you to be kind of my sounding board. What's
Mm-hmm.
going on? Do you think this is valid? And they confirmed, in fact, what you're feeling is
Hmm.
valid. This is actually a thing
Right.
that that we have experienced as well.
So these were people that you confided in your workplace?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. And and I love how you destigmatize mental health and therapy. I love that. So can you share some of the tools that you learned? Because you said that during the therapeutic process, you were able to distinguish, is it me being overly sensitive? Is it something else? What are the signs? So what were those things that you were able to kind of pick up on?
So there's a couple of things, right? My therapist taught me, she gave me this sentence that I thought on the surface sounded really simple, but I realized that it was powerful. And she said, Liz, everybody doesn't think the same way you do. And at first I kind of felt like, well, am I thinking wrong? And then when I realized, kind of as I sat in it, which is the second part, as I sat in it, I realized that that just means that people process things differently,
Hmm. Hmm.
different ways of approaching life. They have different ways of processing things and
Hmm.
morals, principles, all of that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So when I looked at it in that way, I was like, okay, there are people in the workplace who, even if I'm coming at it from a team perspective and
Hmm.
I want to participate and be a good teammate, there
Hmm.
are people in the workplace who don't have that same viewpoint.
Hmm.
They may be there to, they bring in everything they are. And if they're a
Right.
bully side, they don't leave that at the door,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
The way that they are externally, they bring
Hmm.
that.
Right. So
So
that bullying behavior is a carryover from their regular
absolutely.
way of being. It's like a personality kind of way of being, right?
Hmm.
Wow. Okay. So you were able to, look back, self-reflect, talk to other people. So those are the things that you did. And so how were you able to definitively say this is workplace bullying? How did you come to that determination? This is what it is. Did someone give you the words, or how did you know?
Um, I knew what it was just because of what was happening to me.
Mm,
There were several things. There's a lack of support
mm,
at the building. There's a lack of transparency.
mm,
There was constant questioning. you bring people in for their expertise, but then somebody is questioning you all the time. Right? It's not just questioning for them to say, oh, tell me more. It's questioning as in, that doesn't make sense to me. Or I don't agree with you.
Right.
And that is bullying, right? Especially in the workplace, you're supposed to have a free flow of thoughts and ideas.
Right.
Because it helps everything grow, right?
Right, right.
There were, arguing points that I never made in order to win.
Ooh, wow.
When you're like, wait a minute, I didn't even say that. And you've got this whole argument built up. And it's like, I literally didn't say that.
Right. It's kind of like gaslighting, right? Like, exactly. I didn't say that, right? But you're trying to convince me that I did say it, but I know I didn't say it. Then you get wrapped up in this whole craziness, right? And it's crazy because you mentioned before about you were hired, based upon your expertise, right? And so once you get into the job place, there's this questioning of your competence, right? With the questioning and the digs and having to prove your worth and all these different things, right? Which can be very harmful. So I'm wondering if you can share, Liz, what was that experience like for you? So once you were able to establish this is workplace bullying, how did that then impact you?
So I got my work ethic from my parents. Right. And they always told me, you bring the best of who you are to your job. So it literally made me feel ill and off balance. If I'm going to be as precise as I possibly can. I doubted myself. I had a serious case of imposter syndrome. I was, constantly just doubting myself. And it made me realize that I can't tie my identity to my job. And I think, especially, you're a psychologist, you're a professional, and part of that is tied into who you are as a person.
Right.
So if someone has a bad experience with you, sometimes it could be hard to separate the bad session or maybe the client that you just didn't gel with versus did I do something wrong?
Right. Right.
So when you spend time building expertise in a certain area and someone is constantly criticizing, questioning, and doubting, you're like, wait a minute, is it me?
Right.
That's difficult.
Right. Absolutely. Right. So you work so hard to obtain this expertise and then people are questioning you. Then you start questioning yourself. Then you feel insecure. And then you feel like, man, and like I see one of our participants said, yes, many times our identities are so connected to our professions, right? Because we go into professions hopefully that you love or that you're drawn to or you have a passion for, right? And generally they build upon your talents. And so when you're in these situations, it's absolutely devastating, right?
Yep.
And so it feels like somebody's playing with your mind and it's kind of like crazy making. And so what I'm wondering, Liz, is how did you manifest healing as a result of all this that you went through, right? So self-doubt, your identity being connected to your job. How did you go through the process of manifesting healing as a result of this?
That's my favorite thing to talk about because I, again, back to the therapeutic process, I did the work, right? I identified exactly why it affected me so much. I actually wrote a piece on LinkedIn about work-worth balance.
Ooh,
we talk about
I love it.
Right? We hear that all the time. Is there work-life balance? Is there work-life balance? It really is about work-worth balance. And that's actually a balance between how much of your self-worth you derive from your job. You can have pride of work.
Right.
And you can have pride of work, but that can't be all of who you are.
Right.
Because you were worth something before you ever even had a job.
Right.
So you'll be worth something after you retire from working.
Right. Right.
Not be what your worth is. That was actually, it was really helpful to get that out and share. And hopefully, for people who were working still or kind of in their career, that they could have that thought process. And then I think, surrounding myself with people who weren't blowing smoke. right? Who weren't
Uh-huh.
just trying to pick me up because they love me, but who let me know, you are important, you are loved, you are
Mm-hmm.
valued, we care about you. And that is a part of the healing because you get torn down
Yeah.
so much because
Yeah.
you spend, 40, 50, 60 hours at work
Yes.
and the toxic environment, you're in that. You're literally sitting in that toxic soup week after week, hour after hour, every day.
Right. Right.
And our minds don't turn off, right?
Right, right, right. And it's kind of like when we talk about in the mental health field, we talk about it's no way for you to work with people and not be impacted by their traumas or what's going on, right? It's like walking through water. You're going to get wet, right? So you're talking about, I'm in a toxic environment. I'm just being bathed in toxicity all day. Yes, the toxicity is going to get to you, right? And so when you think about, and you talked about the work worth balance, I think it just really highlights how so many times as people, and I would say, sometimes as Black people, that we um, uh, have looked at our worth externally, right? So we're looking for external validation of our worth as opposed to looking at internally, right? So, as a spiritual, soulful people, we have generally gone within, like, I know
Mhm.
my worth, right? And as we become more a part of this capitalistic society and, trying to adjust to certain ways of being, then we keep affirming, like, oh, I have to have this. I have to, all this materialism, right? And status with jobs. And so it ties that blurs that boundary between that work worth balance. And so I'm wondering, and I'm just curious, I'm just going to throw it out as a curiosity because, I've been doing a lot of reading on this topic. Interesting as I've been posting about it. I've had so many people say, oh my God, I'm going through this right now. I'm so glad you're talking about this. So the articles that I've been reading have been talking about that Black people often experience higher rates of microaggressions at the job or, workplace bullying or anything like that, right? So I'm wondering, Liz, in your situation, does it seem like there was implicit bias or any type of microaggressions in relation to your experience?
What's interesting is I think that most people would assume that as a Black woman, the microaggressions would come from me being Black, right? But in this scenario in particular, it was gender.
Mm,
And there were several incidents that were recounted to me where, there was a particular candidate who was well qualified,
mm-hmm.
but the sentiment that was communicated is, well, she's too attractive. And so people won't take her seriously. And I thought on so many different levels that just, it bothered me because I'm like, okay, so she's qualified, but you made an assessment about the way that she looks
Mm-hmm.
and you automatically robbed her of that opportunity.
Right.
Second, you communicated that to your female employees. So my thing is, okay, so if we're working here, like, are we ugly?
What
There's
does
all
that mean?
that, right, all that backhanded stuff, right?
Right,
So
right.
I think that gender definitely played a role. And in some of the things I've heard is kind of, you hear those little things where it's like, well, calm down.
Mm,
Or, terms that that would only be used towards a woman.
right.
She was very, excitable or, just things like
Those
we
like
know.
buzzwords, right? Buzzwords. Yes,
Exactly.
yes, yes.
That we understand.
Exactly. So when we think about implicit bias, which is like more of these unconscious things that happen, it's kind of like people are generally not aware of it, but it definitely impacts how they see people, decision makings, behavior, everything, right? But you're given an example of how this person it was coming out. The implicit bias was coming out, and they did not have the self awareness enough to recognize, number one, that's inappropriate. And number two, wow, I'm just spewing these stereotypes, right? And just, yeah. So for you, the manifesting healing came through therapy. It came from, a supportive circle of other people. Anything else that you would want to share with the audience about how you were able to manifest healing through workplace violence? Well, it is a form of workplace violence, actually. Bullying is a form of workplace violence. So how were you able to come to the state that you are now, right? So I'm sure it was a process, right? And so can you kind of describe the process and kind of let us know where you are now?
Yeah. So in the therapeutic process, one thing that I learned is that if you have a feeling, feelings aren't facts, but you need to get to the bottom of why you have that feeling. What's the underlying thing, right? And my therapist said, if you don't have the exact word, use a bunch of words until you get to it. So you might find out that you're angry about something, but it might be hurt, betrayal, despair, sadness, whatever. So you use all those words until you get to that point. And what I was doing was identifying, why does this bother me so much? What is it about that? So, listing all those words or those phrases or those things where you tell yourself, I feel like I'm qualified. I feel I'm a good person. I'm a good teammate. I'm a good colleague. I have good ideas. I've had expertise in this area, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like I'm not being taken seriously. I'm being devalued. I'm being ignored. I'm being talked over. I'm being willfully misunderstood. And so once I listed all of those things, I was able to attach it to that person, that they were making me feel that way, but I wasn't actually that way.
That is so profound, right? They're trying to make me feel that way, but I am not that way, right? So you're grounded in your greatness. You know what you're coming with, right? And they're trying to come at you to discredit you and to undermine you and all that. And that just really speaks to how important it is for us to have that firm foundation. And you also talk about your parents, in terms of they instill certain things within you, because we're going to be navigating and countering so much negativity, and when we don't have that grounding, then yes, I think it increases the likelihood we'll start internalizing that, right? That negativity of people around us. So that is a beautiful example. Yes.
You're only supposed to take on, and this again in therapy, I sound like a broken record. You're only supposed to take on what you're accountable for. You can't carry the weight of everything. And that requires you to look within to see, well, how much of this do I bear responsibility for, to, receive and deal with that. But other stuff you're not responsible for. I'm not responsible for this person's background. I'm not responsible for the way they're treating me, that they don't have. And I'll give you an example. I actually got coached on how to speak to this individual.
Wow.
And I was like, we are all adults. Why do I have to be coached on how to talk to this person? Well, you can't say the middle of next week. You have to say Wednesday.
Oh my gosh.
You can't say several. You have to say 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it is. Things like that were that specific. And I'm thinking, if that's what I have to do, not be able to communicate efficiently because I have to kind of skew on these very unimportant details, then there's no way that you can have success.
Right. And you're constantly second guessing yourself all day. Like, okay, should I say it this way? So now you're super exhausted, right? So you're dealing with the toxicity, trying to survive in the toxicity, and then you're like exhausted. Like, can I just ask a simple question, or do I need to get coached about it? It's too much, right? So just wondering, Liz, what was the breaking point for you? Like, when were you like, I'm done, right? And the reason I'm asking that is that because so many people are experiencing this now, people watching right now might be like I'm experiencing this, but I don't know, like, when should I just say done?
I think, gosh, I'm trying to remember the exact point because I feel like I always knew, like, this ain't gonna work. But I set a stake in the ground for myself, right? To say, I am not happy right now. And once you set that stake in the ground, then you can put other things in place. You become empowered. So I think it was a few months in, I was like, this is not working. And so let me make a plan for myself of how I could potentially exit.
Okay.
The pandemic took care of that for me. But I think that you have to make the plan, and that's really what takes you from feeling like a victim to someone who's empowered to take charge.
Yes.
Because, okay, look, I know I want to leave. I'm going to work on my resume. I'm going to network. I'm going to, I'm going to apply for X number of jobs a day. And that lets you know that, you know what, I have my own back. If no one else has my back, I got my own back. And you keep moving forward in that sense. So I think you have to make the plan and work the plan.
Absolutely. Because when you think about trauma, a lot of times you feel boxed in, and that's part of, the stuckness, right? And so a lot of times when people experience trauma, then depression comes on too, because you just feel that there's no way out. And so what you're talking about is that even in the midst of a trauma, it's important for you to recognize there are ways out and start actually planning for that. Little steps here and there, not something big all at once, but just start making steps, right? So I just have one last question, and I hope it's okay to ask this. So in my reading, they were talking about, there's various ways that workplace bullying can impact you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I'm wondering if you would be okay sharing with the audience just some of how it impacted you on multiple levels, because sometimes people think, workplace bullying is like, oh, you're just mad about, or, whatever, but it really has like an all-encompassing, impact. And so that's why it's so devastating. So just wondering if you could share a bit about that.
Yeah, I think in acknowledging that that's the cause of it, right? I think we go through life with anxiety and just kind of low grade dis-ease, and we don't tie it back to something, right? So first acknowledging that was big to me. And emotionally, I felt drained. I felt small. It really affected my self-esteem for a long time. I had to, like the Bible says, David had to encourage himself. The way that it affected me was anytime I'm with my thoughts, which is 24 hours a day, I had to train myself like, okay, let me capture this thought and let me dispel it. There was a lack of motivation at a certain point. I wasn't myself.
Right.
And I feel like I wasn't my most creative, and I wasn't the best that I could have been. I tried to be great for my colleagues because it wasn't their fault. This was coming from higher than them. But I know that I could have been better. I could have been an even better version of myself. That's how it affected me. And it also put me, interestingly enough, it put me on the crusader path, right? So there's the idea that if I see somebody else going through this and I find out in passing conversation or whatever, I wanted to be the first one to jump up and let them know you're not alone.
Wow.
Figure out how to get out, because I feel like when you help other people, it helps you as well.
Absolutely.
With friends going through issues, like, okay, I'm here, I'm listening to you. If you need to vent, text me, call me, whatever, because like this, fraternity or sorority of people who are going through the same experience, and you have to be there for one another, because what happens on the other side are things like this, where when you reach the point where you're not experiencing it, you can still help other folks.
Right. So I think it's important because we don't want people to suffer in silence, right? We don't want people to think that they're alone in their experience. And you're right. As we're healing and we're helping to support the healing of other people, it helps us even more, right? And I also think about, because I know, your podcast and I know, your way of thinking, right? And so when we think about community healing, this is a part of community healing and part of the work that I do too, right? So yes, it's great that you're healing, but we also have to lift as we climb, we have to lift other people as they're healing as well. And that's a classic example of what you have done with being open about it. And as you said, like, I'm fighting for you. We're gonna do this. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. So Liz, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing about workplace bullying, because we know that it is a very real thing. I started off asking, is it really a thing? We absolutely know it's a thing, right? So
Absolutely.
we also know that it is a thing. It may impact us differently, right? It's important to call a thing, as Iyanla Vanzant said, and to get the support we need as we start developing that exit plan, right? And so now you're on the other side, right? So you got another job, you helping other people, you got your podcast, like you are like that's an example of what I call post-traumatic growth, right? So you experienced this trauma. Of course, nobody would have ever wanted you to go through that trauma, Liz, right? But you just skyrocketed after, right? So you were on a whole nother level.
And what you're making is such a great point, because you can learn from any situation you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people that phrase, I don't know if anybody but Black people say it, but you eat the meat and you spit out the bones, right? You get what you can from that situation and you let the other stuff go. There's always something to learn, even in the tough parts.
Yes.
I learned, how to identify things, how to care for myself. I also learned what I would not do to anyone in that situation. I learned how to help other people who are in toxic scenarios feel supported and get out of those situations.
Right.
So, again, eat the meat, spit out the bones, and, use it as a stepping stone.
Right.
And something that holds you back.
Right. And another Black term, right? When you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? Like, I'm done, I'm done. I'm done. And I deserve better than this, right? I deserve better than this. So again, Liz, I wanted to say that I was on Liz's podcast, Black Mental Health Matters. And so please check out her podcast. What we're talking about, Black Mental Health Matters. And then we're going to do a part 2 that's going to come out in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And so we know that many times for Mental Health Awareness Month, it's more general in terms of, let's reduce the stigma, but there's so many other layers for Black people in relation to our wellness and our mental health and getting mental health treatment. So I hope that you will tune in, when our part 2 comes out. And again, Liz, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And it's so perfect that Liz talked about exit plans, right? And so how important it is for us to think about an exit plan, because it lets us know about choice, right? So we're going to transition and we're going to bring on a clinician who's going to talk about exit plans, right? So again, Liz, I want to thank you so much. And I know we'll be in contact soon.
Thank you for this topic and for creating a place where people can feel seen and heard. So I appreciate you and all the work that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. So we're going to transition where I am going to bring on another guest. Just bear with me as I find her. Okay, here she is. Okay. Okay. So here we go. Melissa? Melissa? Oh. Let me see. Go live. Oh gosh. Okay. It says that she's unable to join. Melissa, I don't know if you're there. Well, I see you're there. And I'm trying to add you, but it's saying that I cannot add you. So I'm so sorry about that. I don't know what happened. But I do want to share about the phenomenal work of Miss Melissa Shepherd Williams. And she talks about, I really wanted her to be here because she talks about what it's like sometimes when we experience trauma or stress and how we actually feel frozen, right? And so Melissa does work with people to develop exit plans. And so you can follow her on IG and reach out to her through IG to connect in terms of scheduling a time to talk about exit plans. And so we know that that's extremely important, as Liz just talked about. So when we feel stuck in situations, it's important for us to reflect on and follow up with our options out. We are never stuck in situations, even though it may feel like we're stuck, we are not stuck, okay? And so I want to thank you for joining this Manifesting Healing Monday. We plan to have an IG Live every first Monday of the month. So that is Manifesting Healing Monday. And I see Melissa is trying to join, and I cannot figure out why it's not letting her join. It just says unable to join, Melissa. So I'm so sorry about that. But again, Melissa Shepherd Williams, you can find her on IG in relation to exit plans. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining Manifesting Healing Monday, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Take care. Bye-bye. Is still on?
What's it saying?
What?
What does it say right there?
Invite to join?
Let's see.
In video?